Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. And today I want to talk about acceptance, relationships, and then being a little easy on ourselves when we're not quite getting things right. So, reading some from The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer, and I'll hit first on acceptance because it was one of the most important ideas that was introduced to me when I started my journey of recovery about 18 months ago. Acceptance of the world around me as it is rather than the way I want it to be is a cornerstone of my spiritual growth, of the spiritual foundation that I'm trying to build. And that's not the way it used to be for me. I used to completely resist the world around me as it was and think incessantly about the way that I thought the world should be, and then get really upset that it wasn't that way. Um, and so, one of the things that I've had to learn in recovery is that acceptance is a key part of not only spiritual growth, but contentment, happiness, joy, living a less stressful life, and really solving a lot of the problems that I created for myself in my active addiction. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book. He says, to avoid this, begin dealing with each situation with acceptance. Acceptance means that events can make it through you without resistance. If an event takes place and is able to make it through your psyche, you will be left face to face with the actual situation as it truly exists. Since you are dealing with the actual event rather than stored energy stimulated by the event, you won't assert reactive energy from your past. You will find that you are able to deal with daily situations much better. It is actually possible to never have another problem for the rest of your life. This is because events are not problems. They are just events. Going to read that one again. This is because events are not problems. They're just events. Your resistance to them is what causes the problem. But again, don't think that because you accept reality, it means you don't deal with things. You do deal with them. You just deal with them as events that are taking place on the planet Earth and not personal problems. So, very important distinctions here. And I think the big thing that jumped out at me first when I read this was this is because events are not problems, they're just events. Your resistance to them is what causes the problem. And this reminded me of what I've been taught and what I've talked about several times in these videos, that it's my reaction to the world around me and not the world around me that's really the problem in this situation. He gives a great example of a person who is scared of dogs. Dogs are not the problem, it's the person's fear that's the problem. It's that fear that they need to deal with in order to accept reality as it is, which is they exist on a planet with dogs. And so it's very similar in the things that we do on a daily basis. The things that we resist, that we come up against, that cause us anger, that cause us fear, that cause us irritation, anxiety. All of these feelings are good opportunities for us to take a look and say, okay, what within me is going on that's causing me to resist this part of my life experience? If you can take a look at that and figure out what that is, and then even if you, and I'll say this, even if you can't figure out what it is, don't worry about what's driving it. When you feel those emotions, that anxiety, that fear, that anger, sadness, whatever it is, just relax. Just take it easy, relax, and let whatever is happening happen. Deal with it, do what makes sense to do in that situation, but just let it happen the way that it's unfolding. Don't try to fight against it. And this is very important in relationships. And that's something that a lot of us in active addiction and then in recovery, we have a problem relating with people, because as much as it might hurt to say it, a lot of us used relationships to get things we wanted. A lot of us felt like relationships were a means to an end. And we never really used relationships in a pure way of just getting to know another person. And I can tell you from experience, as someone who, in my addiction, used people in relationships to get the things I wanted, and has now gone to a different place in relationships where I genuinely uh, care about getting to know other people and learning more about them, and just enjoying company of other people. It's a very different way to operate. And so I'll read a paragraph that he writes about this. He says, so, as your path, you take on the work of using life to let go of your resistance. Relationships are a great way to work with yourself. Imagine if you used relationships to get to know other people rather than to satisfy what is blocked inside of you. If you're not trying to make people fit into your preconceived notions of what you like and dislike, you will find that relationships are not really all that difficult. If you're not so busy judging and resisting people based upon what is blocked inside of you, you will find that they are much easier to get along with, and so are you. Letting go of yourself is the simplest way to get closer to others. So relationships with the people who we work with, relationships with our friends, even relationships with our spouses in recovery can completely change. But we have to let go of some of the things that we might have been holding in ourselves previously. We've got to be able to approach these relationships in a fresh way and look at it as, okay, how can I just get to know this person and allow not only get to know them, but just be with them as they're being who they are, rather than trying to get them to fit something, rather than trying to get them to do what I'd like them to do. And one of the really important things that I have been working on since being in recovery is not judging people. I used to judge people anytime I was around people, anytime I was doing anything that involved other people, watching TV, reading a book, on a conference call, I was judging people. And it was an emotion and a feeling that got tiring after a while. And I didn't like it, but I didn't know how to stop it. And accepting people the way they are, and it doesn't mean that you don't speak up when you feel like they're doing something wrong, necessarily, but accepting them the way they are is a critical part of learning how to accept the world around you. And it's also a critical part of learning how to be in relationships with other people. And that's something that a lot of us who are in recovery need to do. We need to practice being in relationships with other people because we're not that good at it. So the last thing I'm going to mention is all of this is work. It's work to do these things. It's work to get these things. It's work to learn how to do these things. And you can't beat yourself up if you don't get it right the first time. Uh, we talk about progress, not perfection in AA. And it's so critical to keep that in mind and to be easy on yourself. And here's what Singer says about this. He says, deep inner release is a spiritual path in and of itself. It is the path of non-resistance, the path of acceptance, the path of surrender. It's about not resisting energies as they pass through you. If you have difficulty doing this, don't get down on yourself. Just keep working with it. It's the work of a lifetime to become that open, that complete, and that whole. And that's the thing to remember. It's the work of a lifetime. This kind of stuff where we're trying to learn how to navigate this chaotic, wild world that we live in with the kind of tools we're given to do that, this is a lifetime of work, and if I live to be 100 years old, I hope that every day I'm able to look back on that day and see something that I could have done differently, something I could have done. I hesitate to use the word better, but something I'd like to improve on the next day. That is a spiritual life, and that's where we see growth. And if we adapt that way of living, that's where we really decrease the likelihood that we're going to go back to using drugs and alcohol to help us deal with this chaotic, wild world. And instead can rely on the things that we're learning as part of our spiritual journeys to deal with it instead. Hope you all have a great day, and I'll be back here tomorrow with more.